I was like, what's happening? Hey, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. You know how I love to talk about stress and the endocrine system and all of these things that impact our hormones. And today we're going to be diving into something that's even, I don't want to say more powerful, but it is sort of the epicenter of a lot of what is going on in our body and how things impact us. And it's just such an exciting new area that I know we haven't covered on the podcast before. So I'm super pumped to talk about it with today's guest, who's Alyssa Chang, who's a neuroscience health coach for those seeking a scientific, compassionate, and whole human approach to health and healing, so you can learn how to live a life designed with listening and attuning to your body's unique needs. Neuroscience health coaching involves deeply understanding the inner workings of the nervous system and its role in how it governs the way that we think, behave, feel in our body, and move through the world. A brain-based approach allows us to deeply understand the way trauma has shifted our ability to embody intuition, access safely, and trust ourselves, while also providing us a path forward to heal and thrive. You can find out more at coachalysachang.com. Welcome.
Thank you, Christine.
So excited that you're here talking about this.
Yeah, I'm so grateful.
Yeah. And as we were kind of like talking about before we started hitting record, this area of neuroscience and sort of, you know, how you got into it and how you, as you were telling me, kind of realized it was a game changer. Let's talk about what it is and what you feel like was such a game changer in learning about it.
Yeah, I think a large part of that is kind of like my own personal journey. I was a competitive athlete, so I was definitely in that perfectionism, no pain, no gain type of mentality that just drove me to burnout and overtraining. And then I stepped into figure competitions because I thought, why not? Right. So then
I'm already fit. Let's do this.
Right. Well, it was already like, it was also just this like, why don't I just push my body even more, to that extreme?
Right.
So did the, traditional dieting, packaging the food, excessive exercise, and exited competitions as what they coin it as metabolic damage. So I had this severe, rebound experience of leaky gut syndrome, depression, high anxiety, chronic, so much fatigue that it was like debilitating. I was sleeping so much, yet still never feeling better.
Yeah.
A really rapid weight gain where I just felt like my body was, taking over and I had absolutely no control.
Wow.
So I was resorting back to just training traditionally, right? Doing the things that I knew how.
It worked. Yeah.
I kept getting sicker and I was like, what is happening? Like, this stuff is supposed to work. And so I had a wonderful mentor at that time that kind of presented this certification I was naming to you, Z Health Performance and Education. And all they talked about was the importance of addressing the nervous system, the importance of understanding that inherently our brain and body are always trying to work with us, protect us, keep us alive. And I was like, but all the things that she's trying to do, I don't get. Like, why is it happening? Why is she making
She's
me
not on my side right now at all. Yeah.
And it was this combative relationship. And as I learned a lot more about the brain and these structures and the responsibilities of each of these lobes, I was able to actually cross that bridge over to working with my body. So I started to learn a lot more about, what pain really was, why were these symptoms coming up and how do I create a very non-traditional approach to healing my metabolism and then obviously living a much more aligned life with what truly mattered to me. So neuroscience health coaching is, adopting that lens of looking at everything from this lens of, she's working with you, she's trying to keep you alive, like lean into those symptoms as helpful data points.
So can you tell us some of the things that you actually started doing to help heal your body in that process?
Yeah, coming off of such a regimented, structured perfection, like the dieting, all the things were so regimented. I had to like really take basically time off from cardio because that just escalated my anxiety, my cravings. I gained weight when I did cardio. And most people, right, we read articles, it's like do cardio for weight loss or body changes.
Yeah.
And so I, scaled back extensively on traditional forms of movement. And I literally had to create a much safer, I had to relearn, I should say, how to safely move my body again, because exercise was such a big threat to my nervous system,
Right.
that it just pushed me into more starvation mode. It pushed me into survival mode.
Right.
So I had to walk. And even at the beginning of my journey, walking was so threatening, like being up and like moving my body just in that capacity because I was so tired.
Yeah.
So I worked a lot on relearning how to properly breathe for my nervous system. Did a lot
come back to the breath.
Yep. Z Health talks a lot about vision therapy. So I had to do a lot of vision therapy. I did a lot of vestibular training, and really was in a junction of my journey of just like blank canvas. You are learning a brand new body, like forget everything that you've trained in the past, and let's like actually take inventory of like what's showing up now and how do I tend to those symptoms.
Okay. Sorry, I'm writing things down because I have so many questions that just came up in the things that you said. So first, can I ask you, how old were you when this occurred?
I competed in 2010.
Okay.
So that was, like 13 years ago.
Yeah.
For a year. And then prior to that, I was also in that extreme mentality because I was training as like an intense athlete.
Right.
And then my rebound lasted probably about like, and when I say rebound, that's where like I felt like my body was fighting me. This was like 2-ish years. And I was also very stubborn. So I take full responsibility over not listening to my body.
Super common. Yeah. Well, and I was asking because I think I see probably not that quite as extreme because they may not have been competitive athletes or anything like that, but I see this in clients a lot, right? Just especially as you get to your mid 30s and later, the cardio thing that stops working, right? And it's the same kind of idea. It's just like your body needs to feel safe. And this is going against that safety, right? It's like high alert. And so many women come to me and they're like, I don't understand. Cardio was like what I've done for the last 15 years and it always worked. And suddenly it's not working. And I'm like, okay, so there's multiple factors going on here. But part of that is, as you move into the perimenopausal stage of life, your body's needs change dramatically. And that like safety, security, walking, things like that we're like, are you kidding me? That doesn't do anything. It does so much for your nervous system and that retraining possibility, and I always tell women, it's not like you're never going to be able to do cardio again, but if you're in this state from the cortisol perspective, where you're either way high cortisol or what I often see by the time they come to me, way low cortisol. Like if you're trying to like do HIIT with way low cortisol, you're going to be exhausted, right? It's just, you have no oomph in there. And so you need to replenish your system, and I know you're talking about some of the ways that you can do that, but yeah, that's why I was interested. I was like, oh, I wonder if she was younger or if you were a little bit further along. Yeah. It can happen at any time. It doesn't have to be about age.
Totally. And I think that's where like our unique health history, like a lot of clients that I will work with will be like, well, I didn't compete. And I was like, that's like, that doesn't create like the identity that this is now your, future. It's just the amount of like trauma we independently carry, how our brain has adapted. And then we can present very similar experiences and symptoms, regardless of the path that we took to get there. And so I think that the story of, this used to work, now it doesn't, right? There's nothing more fearful or anxiety provoking than feeling like you don't have control over your body, right? That it seems to be on its own agenda. And you're like, I'm out of options. What do I do now?
Right. Yeah. And can you talk more about the trauma piece and how that fits in?
Yeah. So, trauma is such a nuanced, very kind of gray space. And so how I like to define it is the definition I do appreciate is naming that trauma is not necessarily what happened to you, it's what happens inside of you. And I like to kind of evolve that into, and then it's also the way that your brain has then adapted and attuned to safety. So when we experience something traumatic, and people will coin it as big T, little t, but I think it's just trauma is trauma
across the board.
It will shift how our nervous system basically is going to move through the world. So it's highly independent. It's very unique. We catalog a lot of different traumas over the course of our life. And if we are, with the understanding that the brain is always working for and with us, a lot of the ways we cope and self-soothe is a result of our brain feeling some sort of threat or stress or danger. And so sometimes, right, all these habits we want to break free of, we want to, not, cope with mindless scrolling on social media, and we want to take care of ourselves. Before we can change, we want to, hold really compassionate space to understand like, oh, this has shown up to protect me. And so trauma kind of has this really ironic way of showing up for us because it has proven to keep us alive. And as a more healed, evolved, self-aware person, we then want to acknowledge for our brain and body, like, that was in the past, we're much safer right now, and getting that logical and survival brain to almost meet on the same path so that healing is right in our trajectory, in our path forward.
Absolutely. So you talked about some of the things that played a role for you, like the breathing, and we certainly could talk more about that, but I'm curious about vision training you mentioned, and then the vestibular something. Vestibular something.
It's so interesting because when people ask like, well, how did you, heal your metabolism? I was like, well, I had to create safety in my body. And as I started studying the nervous system, we want to understand that your visual system, which is housed in our occipital lobe, is our brain's first window into understanding how safe we are. So we have two eyes that are taking so much input in from colors, from moving objects, from shapes, etc. If our eyes, however, do not work well by themselves, don't work well together, can't see clearly, we will automatically navigate the world with more threat. So we may always get headaches. And then on top of that, we're all on Zoom, right? We're on screens, like how much of our world is oriented around. So our eyes are just like muscles in the rest of our body that for some reason, right, fitness and health culture, we're not really encouraged to train them as often. So as a result, just like muscles, right, they get tight. When muscles get tight, our range of motion decreases, our pain probably increases. And then we again move through the world with more rigidity and hypervigilance, both common side effects of trauma. So for vision therapy, there's these 4 specific categories we can learn how to move our eyes better through, similar to how we would want to, strengthen our hamstrings to be a better runner, that we want to address like our healing process and our health journey from like this whole human approach and not necessarily forget everything from the neck down, right? Our jaw, our tongue, our eyes, our ears, our nose all play a very, very big role in our brain understanding how safe we are.
Interesting. Yeah. You don't really think about the senses, right? It makes sense. Like you're taking things in via your senses. And so, there are, just all these traditional ideas of the things that we should be working out and focusing on, that kind of thing. And yet, it makes perfect sense to me. Of course, like your vision is going to have an impact, a huge impact on the situation. So are there like eye exercises in that then?
Yeah.
Can you show us one?
Yeah. So the nervous system moves exponentially fast. So I always encourage clients to basically assess something before we do any type of movement, both objectively and subjectively. So while you're here with me, you can sit up nice and tall. And then Christine, just rotate your head to the right and then to the left. And then all you're doing is taking inventory of how you feel. Do you feel any tension or pain? How does your range of motion feel on one side versus the other? How does it feel?
So I definitely, so my right side is tighter. I can feel it in here. And then, so my range of motion is definitely better on the left side.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So what we want to do is I'm going to take you through a very quick kind of vision exercise.
Okay.
You're basically going to follow your thumb, head and neck stay nice and still.
Okay.
And you're going to track your thumb in a circle.
Okay.
And as you do this, again, your neck stays still and
Okay.
your eyes are just moving through this range of motion. We'll go 3 in each direction. Okay. And I'm just going to watch you. And then if you can, Christine, let's go a little slower and then a little bigger with your circle. And all I want you to track for yourself is, at any point, does the circle feel tighter? Is it up and to the left? It feels a little more eye strain. Maybe you start to hold your breath. Maybe your heart rate changes.
Yeah, I noticed more tightness up on this right-hand side, like all the way up on the side.
Mm-hmm. And then all I'm doing is I'm just watching and assessing you.
Gotcha.
Great.
So yeah, and I would say definitely more tightness here and then almost across the top too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Try and check your neck. So you're
Okay.
just going to reassess to see how this feels.
Okay.
Do you feel any less grippy or tension in the back of the right side?
I have more range of motion for sure on the right
Beautiful.
side. Like I still feel some stuff in there, but it's definitely, I can take it further than I could before. Yeah.
Right. So here's the interesting thing. Muscles will become tight as a protective response. If
Right.
our eyes, we did a quick vision drill. I could have done maybe a vestibular drill. I could have done a breathwork drill, anything that can decrease your level of threat and improve map clarity, brain map clarity.
Okay.
We're talking about vision. So we did a vision circle.
Yeah.
But when we reduce tension, all we want to catalog for our brain is like, oh, our brain really liked that. It helped improve our visual map. And as a result, Christine's body didn't have to create muscle tension. So in many cases, right, we go to massage therapists, maybe we roll on the muscle, but is the muscle just the symptom, right? That's not the root issue. Right. So neuroscience health coaching allows us to get a much deeper understanding of someone's brain and why symptoms are presenting itself so that we can actually rewire from a much more foundational level. And then hopefully, right, a lot of my clients end up walking away with a lot of tools so that then they're like, oh, I feel creaky in my neck. Instead of modifying their posture, right? Maybe they hold excess tension, which just is them placing themselves more in that survival state. If we reduce muscular tension, our brain is expending less energy, which can then be focused on, client calls, executing tasks at work, whatever it may be, that they become more efficient movers and efficient people during the day. So
interesting.
One thing as I was assessing your eyes is I could definitely tell, right, that the upper right quadrant, and then as you went into eye extension, which is just the upper half of the circle, your eyes had a harder time staying on the target point. So you started to skip ahead, which is a very normal thing that the brain will do when it doesn't like to keep its eyes in a spot.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Some follow-up questions I would inquire about you is, have you had any kind of trauma, stress, or anything that happened above you? That's one thought question we could entertain. Okay. And then also kind of what has happened up to the right. So the brain will always kind of chunk these traumatic events with maybe eye position. So up to the right is a common area, especially if the clients have had like a car accident or they were rear-ended. So they looked in their rearview mirror, saw that the car behind them wasn't stopping, rear-ended them. The brain chunked looking up to the right with something bad happening.
I definitely had that happen to me in San Francisco. Speaking of, for this listening, we were talking about how we both used to live in San Francisco before we got on. I was like, yep, got rear-ended twice, but the first time was me. I saw it happen, like, because I was looking up in the rearview mirror. Yeah, interesting.
So how we want to understand this is that when we've experienced something unpredictable that we have that reflexive startle response and our eyes are locked in a position, the brain may now chunk, right? Oh, looking up to the right for Christine is not a safe eye position. So then over the course of years going by, you don't look up to the right. If you don't look up to the right, you lose that ability to utilize your peripheral vision to take in input. Right. Then what we could notice is you have a lot of right-sided tension or pain, right? You have like, oh, your migraines tend to sit on the right side. You have a right shoulder issue. Your right hip often bothers you, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because kind of a lot has happened on the right side of my body, right? So they, when I was mentioning to you the surgery that I went through, the main area that they burned me was in the right side on my colon. And basically, when I was having, everything dumping out into my abdominal cavity, a lot of it was on that right side. It definitely built up. I had multiple abscesses that ended up happening under my liver on that right side. So there's a lot going on, and then actually, I mean, this is maybe way off and not in your, views, but I just had a friend remind me recently that years ago I had a reading done where in a past life I had a literal like disc thrown into me on my right side. So essentially there's a lot of trauma on that right side. Yeah.
Do you've ever read any books or research around generational or lineage trauma? A lot of how we show up in the world kind of isn't, I mean, I shouldn't say kind of, it isn't all ours.
Yeah.
We carry a lot of these generations of very, triggering events happening that how we show up in the world really provides us hopefully that compassionate space to be like, wow, I'm doing an amazing job given all the stuff I'm carrying.
No doubt.
I'm kind of like, my philosophy is that I have some clients that are so in tune. They have like these experiences that to me, I'm like, wow, that makes a lot of sense from what I'm assessing for movement that there may have been, right? It's like this generational trauma that was influencing your nervous system, that how you show up, right? Someone could do soft tissue on you over and over again, but if it's not addressed from the deeper roots of how this has impacted you,
right,
it's going to continue to show up again, right?
Right. It's like, it's, especially if you think genetically, it's literally on a cellular level, right? So it's like, you have to change these things. Yeah. I mean, the massage is helpful in the moment, or with chiropractic work or any of those things, but for it to actually stick and be something different, you have to go to that deeper level. Amazing. So what's the vestibular training?
Yeah. So the vestibular system is your inner ear, which is responsible for us understanding our relationship to gravity. So it's as big as like the pinky fingernail in you, and it lives in your inner ear. And when I take someone's health history form, what I'm looking for is the symptoms that they name and where I know these symptoms to live in the body. So let's say someone is like, oh, I always get motion sickness. I hate roller coaster rides. I could never be a passenger driving. I hate winding roads. I have a high pain threshold. Those are very characteristic symptoms of someone's vestibular system not working well for them. So they may take Dramamine, right? They may start to remove enjoyable options from their life as a result of their brain being compromised. So, when I think about what I do, yes, I work with the brain and body, but ultimately I want to create so much expertise and comfort and safety for your brain and body, so that then you don't have to say no to the things that ultimately would bring you joy or would connect you to the people and relationships in your life. So not saying that we all need to be comfortable riding on roller coaster rides, but maybe we want to take that windy car ride to the beach that's on the other side of the road, So the vestibular system is commonly, again, linked to those symptoms. I tend to attract a lot of clients who have vestibular deficits, and how we train that is really looking at different head nodding and head motions. If you just think about like jump roping, that's a vestibular input system. When we, people who say they hate running, usually it's not necessarily that you're not a skilled runner, but maybe your breathing is dysfunctional at rest that would make movement feel so challenging. It could also be a balance thing. So if running is a single leg exercise, if your inner ear isn't appropriately interpreting your environment, running is going to be an extreme amount of threat. So I recently started to dabble back into running, and I was like, well, let me start from the fundamentals. Let me look at my breathing at rest. Let me assess that. Let me start my breath work training. Let me assess my vestibular system. Okay, let me start adding in all the vestibular inputs. And I have not run in a really long time. And I was like, oh my God, I have no pain. I feel like I'm more in shape than I would anticipate, given that I have not run in a really long time.
Right, right.
It's because I'm laying the foundations to make running, right, feel safe for my brain and body.
Interesting. Well, and the reason that I was like, oh yeah, about the inner ear thing aspect is because my mom, just started having these balance issues. And a PT friend of mine was like, oh yeah, you can go to physical therapy and they can, it's the vestibular, I guess, physical therapy, because so much of the balance stuff is what's happening in there, and not necessarily, on the outside of our bodies, which we might think is what it's stemming from.
Totally. And a lot of like fitness health culture will prioritize proprioception, which is like, joint mechanics, mobility, dynamic stretching.
Right.
And that is a very valuable component to moving through the world safely in connection to ourselves and our body. However, if we look at the neural hierarchy, so the hierarchy of how the brain inputs information, vision is at the top, then it's the vestibular system, and then it's our proprioceptive system. So proprioception is actually a lower need of how the nervous system depends. I should say how the nervous system depends on creating safety is actually at the lower end. So we want to prioritize vision and vestibular input. Just the hard part is that not many people, like, I'll go to like the gym and I'm doing all my vision stuff and I'm like, people probably think I'm weird, but it's
you're like, whatever, put up with it.
But I'm like, I have no pain,
Yeah. You're like, this is working for me. Let me show you how it's done. So can you show us a vestibular exercise?
Yeah. So what I'll have you do is something called VOR. So we actually have two tiny little organs inside of our inner ear. One that controls up and down motion and one that controls kind of forward and back translation. So we're going to isolate, it's going to be a combination of vision and vestibular. So again, we're going to assess you. So just tuck your neck rotation. So side to side, we're gauging again, how does, Christine's body feel right now? Does she still have that lack of tensioning in the right side?
There's still some tension there. I can go further still, but there's still some tension in there. Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm going to have you do is your eyes are going to stay on a target point straight ahead. And then your head is going to actually move. So you see how my eyes stay on the target. And then I'm going to switch sides. So we're doing a VOR drill. And it's called vestibular ocular reflex. Good. And just switching. Good. And Christine, as you feel more comfortable, you're just going to increase the tempo. So what we want to do is we want to get that fluid in the inner ear canal to just move. And the way we do that is just gently increasing speed. And we want to stay on that target point. Good. And as you continue to move through this, we'll go a few more times on each direction. You're paying attention to how each side feels. And then we can walk through what I'm noticing in your assessment or in this drill.
Okay. I definitely noticed just being, it's like smooth, not smooth. smooth.
I love that you could attune to that. It's your very end range of motion, right? There was like a specific tempo and then that motion. Okay. Just check your neck to see how that feels. So again, we're noting how that, any tensioning in the back of the right neck?
Less. It's just a little tiny bit now, but definitely beautiful. Much better than it was.
Yeah. So that's a very quick vestibular drill. We're again moving the inner ear canal. There's a big eye stretch in combination with this. So it's a pretty demanding drill for the nervous system because for some people, they've never stretched or mobilized their eyes with intention. And also having you isolate your eye position while moving your head, so there's a lot of things going on. That in many cases, people will feel kind of like this kind of fatigue and tiredness after doing some drills. And it's like a tiredness that's kind of desirable in a way. And it's really because your nervous system has gotten out of being very so.
Yeah. I'm just thinking about how important this kind of work is for people that are, like so many of my clients are trying to calm their nervous systems, right? And doing things like meditation, visualization, EFT, all of which I love, taking adaptogenic herbs, things like that, but I think a lot of people can get stuck and say, well, I'm kind of doing all those things and I'm still in this place, so it's really interesting to really think about these kinds of exercises that are getting at the areas that we're not necessarily working with normally is so hugely impactful and helpful. So I'm super excited that people get to listen and hear about this today, because I think it's just another layer and level, right?
Yeah. And, it's like, the interesting thing is with traditional ways of like, okay, I'm going to meditate to de-stress. Right. A lot of the clientele, you probably have a very similar, kind of like funnel of people where they are feeling like they're not.
I was like going to say, it's not distress taking them down, because they're like, I'm stressed out at how bad I am at meditating.
Yeah. Like, oh, this is like missing the point. Yeah. So it's like, when we understand that there's like these different trauma responses we carry, a lot of the flight responders where they like self-soothe by moving their energy. So they're fidgeting, they're multitasking, they're decluttering their closet at 10 o'clock at night when they feel space, right? Meditation becomes one of the worst things, right? The unhealthiest thing for your stress and, the hypervigilance you have.
Right.
Relearning authentic ways to rest your brain and body is such a priority, because rest is where, a lot of the healing happens. But if we're forcing ourselves to fit into a box of rest, it's like, oh, you will always feel bad at it, but it's not you, right? It's just the tool. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is it. Finding that true rest is hard for a lot of people, because of all the things happening outside of us all the time. And then, particularly if we're talking hormones, as you age and sleep becomes harder. And so we just have this sort of constant, building of that being in your sympathetic nervous system, way, way too often. And so you're missing out on all that rest. I mean, that repair that happens during rest. Yeah. And then that just throws hormones off even more,
Totally. Yeah. And it's so hard because so many of us, right, have learned to survive at a specific pace that our brain has so much more repetition in hustling or like disregarding the pings for slowing down. And when we adjust the pace of how we move and we're trying to reestablish a different rhythm to move through life, what we want to recognize is that any change initially will be interpreted as a threat by the nervous system. Right? It's like, oh, is this safe?
This is new. We don't know. Yeah.
So all of that unknown, right? Normalizing that when you choose to change the pace, the style, etc., it's okay if your first response is anxiety or nervousness, right? Breathe through that, name it, and then reassure yourself. And in some capacity, whether it's a vision drill, breathwork drill, something that you are safe in this moment is so important.
I love that. So are these exercises that you do daily for yourself? Or, I guess probably a lot of people are wondering, like, does this become a part of my daily routine, or is it something I do for a period of time, et cetera?
Yeah, great question. So, for me, there's like a repertoire drills that I know are high payoffs. So I know that if I do them, I will immediately feel my anxiety take a notch down. I'll feel more embodied. I'll probably reduce, any type of nagging pain. So there's a repertoire that I love doing every day. And I love doing it. It's not something I'm like, oh, I have to do my brain-based drills, right? It's like something that I crave. The upkeep of it, if we kind of conceptualize like what is neuroplasticity and changing the rewiring of the brain, there has to be upkeep in some regard, but we want to make it practical, right? Realistic. So if I have like a strength training day, I'll just insert all my vision and breath work within my movement practice so that like I also am recovering faster. I'm resetting, quote unquote, resetting my nervous system so that every time I step back up to do a squat, a lift, whatever, I feel it's set one, rep one. So I can build resiliency in a much more efficient way because I'm always tending to, right, the capacity and load I'm building in a workout. So yes, I do them almost every day. And they're practical. They're super easy. Like you did 3 circles in each direction, reduced or improved your range of motion. You can do 3 circles, throughout the day, and it takes a handful of seconds. So I like it from that standpoint that it's like very practical and digestible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I like the idea of doing it before a workout. I mean, that, I think there's a lot of talk recently too, in particular around weight training for women, as they age. It can help so much with your bone health and your testosterone, all those things. And, sometimes I think we can jump into these things when our body's not fully ready, and kind of like you said, it may have a intense reaction because it may be kicking you into more of your sympathetic nervous system. So I like the idea of using this as a foundation before you hit the weights, and really in talking about neuroplasticity, we know now, right, that continues through the rest of our lives. It's not like they used to think, oh, once you get old, brain doesn't change at all, right? It just right. gets worse, and it's like, no, we know that's not the case. So it's like, I think we know in general, like, we're not going to maintain muscle in our arms if we don't go to the gym consistently and lift some weights or do some, kind of workout. The same is true for all these other things. It's like, it has to become a part of who we are. And I'm sure too, like, changing things up sometimes is helpful too, right?
Definitely. Yeah. So it's interesting, right? I named that the brain will interpret any initial change is threatening, but the brain also deeply craves novelty.
Right.
So
100%.
why, right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's how we get our dopamine hits. Like, give me something new. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's like that balance for each of us to be able to identify, like, what's enough new things I personally have the capacity to intake appropriately before it, exceeds my own capacity where it becomes threatening. Right. And that's individualized as well.
Absolutely. Something you have to just deeply pay attention to in your own life on kind of a continuous basis. So you obviously work with people one-on-one on these things. You also do group programs?
Yeah. So I just closed doors on my 6-month brain-based group coaching program called Better Expert, where we run through brain-based assessments. We're looking at 3 specific pillars that I believe are very foundational for creating this plasticity change. So we look at things from a neuronutrition lens as well. So, hunger and fullness cues, obviously, with you being such an expert in hormones, right? Understanding that hormones are really driving how we feel. And if we understand that the brain governs everything underneath that, including hormones, let's look at the nervous system. So we look at that, and then movement, obviously. And then we also explore this mindfulness piece around, things like boundary setting, like how valuable it is to establish boundaries as a way to create safety, like for your brain and body to learn safety, right? And if you can create boundaries in one avenue of your life, your boundaries with movement, exercise, nutrition are all going to line up and be paralleled with that. So
yes. Oh, I love it. So will you do, I know you said it just closed for 6 months. Will you do another one not long after that, or? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I run it. I think this is my 7th round of it. And it's, obviously every time I close doors, I'm like, ooh, time to revamp it, improve it, get feedback. And as a result of Better Expert, because I coin it as you going to school for your body. So we're working on training the brain to heal the body. But I realized that a lot of the demographic I work with are the ones that are really navigating a lot of survival. So sometimes the container Better Expert is intensive and their brain isn't at the space to actually be that student of their body yet. So I created a much more kind of self-paced, there's calls within it, but you can kind of move really at a pace that honors yourself and your nervous system, called Expedition, which then allows you to get familiarized with neuroscience and why I take this brain-based approach, so that then you can build some building blocks. And then maybe by the time the next time Better Expert rolls around, you're like, oh, I get it. I'm much more, in this kind of stable place with my brain and body, that Better Expert seems much more at a better time.
Gotcha. Very cool. This is amazing work that you're doing. I'm so happy that you're doing it and sharing it with the world, because I know that we need a lot of support around our nervous system, and it really is the centerpiece of our hormonal health, I always say, but so much of our health in general. So Thank you.
Totally. Thank
Yeah. And thank
you.
you for breaking it all down for us so well and showing some of
Yeah.
those exercises too. So let people know how they can get in touch with you.
Yes. So as you mentioned, my website is coachalysachang.com. I am on Instagram at Coach Alyssa Chang. And then on my website, there's different options to, subscribe to a newsletter called Nerdy Notes, where I send over weekly digestible neuroscience topics.
Nice.
Usually it's stuff that, I'm noticing come up in my community, maybe personally for myself. And I try to break it down in a way that is digestible. So have some sort of conceptual, actionable step to take as you're moving through a very messy part of like healing, right? Trauma, healing the brain, working with the body. So those are kind of like my ways of, sharing content that hopefully can create with time, right? Some shifts in how we start to relate to the body.
Nice. Perfect. Well, I appreciate your time today being here with us. And I know everybody's going to have some great takeaways. So it's been awesome. Absolutely. All right, you guys, I will see you next week.